Heyo, you're listening to Edge Coach Quip, featuring our very own Edge coaches and community, dropping knowledge nuggets to fuel your day. Hello, and welcome back to Coach Quip. This is episode 107. I'm Coach Robyn.
I'm Coach Chris.
And today we're talking about
Peak Week.
We have arrived.
It's here. It is time.
So first up, what is Peak Week?
So Peak Week is our largest volume. In Peak Week, in marathon training, will be our largest mileage. In triathlon or swimming or rowing or whatever your sport is, it'll be your largest amount of volume in a week. In triathlon, we can have different peak weeks for swimming, a peak week for running, a peak week for biking. But in our marathon training, it is your peak mileage in that marathon training plan right before taper.
It's typically like 2 to 4 weeks prior to race day, depending on your distance. So usually half marathons will be somewhere around 2 to 3 weeks. And then marathon all the way up to Ironman Plus can be more like 3 to 4 weeks for very good reason, which we'll get to in the bonus miles.
Yeah, so we have a couple of tips here from our coaches asking what they would recommend athletes know for their peak week going in. But we're going to kick us off with one main tip that we think is really important for everybody and one that's easily messed up in peak week. And that tip is from Coach J. Rowe.
And it goes like this. What is your nutrition and hydration plan? And we're not talking about just what's happening during your peak effort on your biggest day. We're talking about the timing and what you're eating before, during, and after. So that way you can practice it, you can race it, you can make notes, you know what works, or if it didn't work, don't do that again. In an ideal world, you've been doing this on some of your longer efforts leading up to it. And if not, now is the time to do it during this week.
Yeah, so it's not just the dress rehearsal, and we know that Coach J. Rowe is our nutrition person on staff here and the one that we go to for all of our nutrition tips. Check episode 99 for more information from Coach J. Rowe. But not just that dress rehearsal for that longest effort that you're going to have in your longest long run, but also thinking about nutrition globally. So what does that full week look like? Because in order to set yourself up for a great long run on a Saturday or Sunday, you need to be paying attention to your nutrition throughout the week as you have your largest volume in your recovery runs, your largest tempo run, your speed work. So nutrition is where it's at.
And piggybacking on that recovery phase, right? We know that we need to put some foods in, ideally some carbs and some quality proteins, 30 to 60 minutes after finishing, but also that entire next day. What are we doing to rebuild? What does our hydration look like? What does our nutrition look like? And knowing that we're putting quality things in mean that we can rebuild faster.
So while a lot of you might think that peak week, we're thinking about the training that we're doing, our number one tip here for your peak week is actually to pay attention to your nutrition, hydration, and recovery nutrition. But we have plenty more tips for you in our bonus miles from our other coaches, and you are not going to want to miss those. So stick around. All right, welcome back. We're going to start off with a tip from Coach Worm. So Coach Worm's tip is that it is very common to feel sluggish, tired, exhausted even, maybe out of shape, or totally unprepared for your race coming up when you are in peak week. And that's because we have so much volume, so much intensity, so much of our training trying to be absorbed. And this is the week where we really sort of overload. So Worm's tip is to feel confident and to know that you will be prepared on race day. It's expected that you will feel this way. And so think about to yourself, how would you feel if you weren't tired and broken down and exhausted from all of that training? That's really the mindset you need to have, knowing that all of that is actually going to translate into fitness. So
normalize feeling poor.
Yeah, normalize feeling badly. Know that it's going to happen. Don't overthink it. Know that that is part of the process and that it actually will flip into fitness.
I like that. It's like if you're coming up a mountain and let's say you haven't quite seen the top yet, you're probably not going to feel that good the last, half mile, right, up the mountain or however many, feet it is.
Yeah.
Think of it that way, right?
Yeah.
The peak is the top, and we're not going to feel great as we crest the top. Once you reach the top and see the view, start to head down, you're like, woo, that's going to be the next episode.
Yeah, that's exactly the spot, right? So you know the end is near, but you can't quite see it yet.
Yeah.
So you can expect to feel a little bit like trash, but it will turn around.
All right, next up, we have Coach Dan, and he is all about sleep. So it needs to be a priority this week, which is hard, right? Because it's our biggest mileage. We typically have to wake up really early for that longest deposit too. So our body and our mind, though, are craving recovery during peak week and also after peak week. So there is no better recovery tool than sleep. As much as we want you to, do things like ice baths and wear compression socks and all of those things, sleep is still always going to be your number one tool. So, aiming for 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night, even if that's more than what you normally get, now's the time. Want to tee yourself up by avoiding eating 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. Keep your room nice and cool. Get your extra comfy comforter out, especially if it stays a little cooler like it is now. Put your phones away. During our deepest sleep stages, which is what we're going to get into if we're going for 7 to 8 hours, our muscles are able to repair themselves, eventually able to, grow and become stronger. Our immune system is refreshed, which is great because as we peak, it is a little bit at a disadvantage. And our brain flushes out all of those extra toxins. So we want you to keep that up while you are at your maximum training mode.
Those are just good tips all the way through life,
Yeah.
but such important tips for this week. All right, moving on, we have tips from Coach Shauna, which is stick to the plan. This is a really simple one. What you've been doing is what you should continue doing. So this is not the time, even though this is a time where we have the greatest amount of volume, we don't want to add on a whole bunch of extras. Your plan should have been gradually increasing in your mileage, in your intensity, in your efforts. And so this is just another step along that plan. We don't want you to see peak week and think that you need to add on extra hot yoga classes and strength and
miles because someone else is doing it.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that we are sticking to your plan. What you've been doing is what you should continue doing.
All right, next up is Coach Katie, and I really like this one because I think that a lot of people head into peak week kind of panicked, like, oh my God, here it is. And in actuality, every week you've been doing has kind of been a peak week. It just keeps stacking. Unless it's a recovery cutback week, every time you've had a build week, it is a peak week. You just keep topping it, right? Mm-hmm. So chill the heck out and just start to think of it honestly like a dress rehearsal, right? We don't get nervous before a dress rehearsal before the play, right? We just know that we need to put our costume on, check the set, make sure that our lighting's good, right? All of those things. So, keep calm and plan things out to test them out, whether that's your gear or your nutrition or when you wake up, right? How much time you need to get ready in the morning. All of it is actually a great opportunity to try and see what happens. And guess what? If it doesn't go great, you still have another week after that, most likely in double digits if you're marathon training, where you can test it out again. So it's not the only dress rehearsal.
Yeah, that's so good. It makes sense to be nervous too. Like, let's just say that it's normal to be nervous, especially when you've never touched that distance before. So for a lot of our first time marathoners, hitting that, the 20-mile long run or an 18-mile long run, a distance that they've never done before can be really intimidating. Yeah. And it may have been intimidating at 14 and 16 miles as well, but there's something lower stakes about that. When you start inching towards your actual goal effort, that is where, to me, I think it starts to get really nervous. So just want to say it's totally normal to feel nervous during that week, but so important to keep those feelings under control. All right, next up is a tip from Coach Matt, which is that we should all anticipate that peak week will be hard. Just know that it's going to be tough and that you will feel fatigued. And that's a good thing, actually, because it means your training is working.
I want to piggyback on that too. I think people think that peak week should go perfectly.
Yeah.
And chances are it won't. Like you might have glimmers of like, oh wow, that's some fitness, but don't panic. If your longest tempo or your longest long run don't go well, that does not mean that you're not going to have a great race. It just means that you had a really hard deposit. And in some ways, let's get the crappy runs out of the way, right? And troubleshoot how we can do it better. Mm-hmm. All right, my tip is going to be plan out your recovery. So sort of similar to Coach Dan's, but really I want you to get specific. So come up with a recovery plan for every single day. So whether it's making an appointment for things like tubs and boots, or setting out your compression socks so that you can wear them if you're going to have a longer commute. Going to bed, setting an alarm on your phone to be like, go to bed 15 minutes earlier, just so you have that extra reminder. Every little bit adds up. And guess what? You're a lot more likely to do it if it's on the calendar and you know that you have to show up or you're going to get pinged. You gotta layer it in.
All right, and the final tip here is my tip, which is to keep it positive. Peak week is really your chance to feel more confident in your running and for your race. And so it's not just about accumulating that physical fitness, but also about that mental toughness piece. So reflect on your training. This is something that we will suggest that you do during your taper as well, but I think it's great for peak week as you are touching these numbers that maybe you've never touched before or haven't touched in this training cycle, to look back at what you've done and to reflect so that you can gain that confidence, because this is your last push before you get to actualize all of that fitness.
You've arrived. All right, to recap, Coach J-Row says to check your nutrition, right? Come up with a plan, write it down for what you're doing during the week, during the longest efforts, and during recovery.
Coach Worm's tip is to normalize feeling badly.
It's going to happen. Coach Dan, prioritize sleep. Aim for 7 to 8 hours a night to maximize recovery and really start to see those gains.
Coach Shauna says, stick with what you've been doing. Don't add any extras.
Coach Katie, chill out and think of this like a dress rehearsal for all your gear, your nutrition, your pacing. Really, it's just that.
Coach Matt says, lean into the hard. If you feel fatigued, you are doing it right.
I weigh in and say prioritize recovery by scheduling it, making sure that every little bit that you can think to do, you do, and you get it on the calendar.
And my final tip is to keep it positive. Keep a positive mindset and reflect back on your training.
All right, here we go to the top.
All right, let's go.
Till next time.
Thanks for listening to Coach Quip. Original music performed by Mend. Follow us online on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edge Athlete Lounge. Our podcast lives in the blog section of our website. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and you can check out the show notes for additional ways to contact us. Ready, set, onward we go.